Good afternoon to you. Mark Suttoth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion for Friday, September 23rd, 2016. The Atlantic hurricane season continuing with Karl and Lisa, and eventually what we will have here, Invest 97L, coming. It's not designated that as of yet. But here's Karl closing in on Bermuda. Could be a hurricane as it passes by. We'll have to see. And then Lisa is fully exposed out here. Shield your eyes. Shouldn't look at that kind of stuff. And this will eventually, just a little joke there, this will eventually dissipate, and that'll be that. Looking at the visible satellite animation this afternoon, there is Bermuda. And here is Karl. And while it certainly has become a lot better organized than it was in the last couple of days, in fact, this is the most healthy that it has appeared yet, it still seems to be suffering a little bit. You know, notice that a good deal of the bottom third of it here remains a little bit exposed. The deeper convection is now on the northwest side. It's getting there, but it still has a little ways to go, which is good news for Bermuda, because as you can see, there's Bermuda here. It looks like it has, the center has tracked just a little bit west of Bermuda, so it's going to have to turn, you know, pretty good to miss the island there with the center. What we don't want to have happen for our friends in Bermuda is for this to come up and go just north and west. If the center comes over, yeah, you get a little bit of a break when the eye of a hurricane comes over you. A lot of people consider that to be the worst possible scenario, is for the eye to hit you. I guess if it's a Cat 5 like an Andrew, where all the quadrants are pretty much equal and they're just terrible for you, then that's a good point. But when you get that right front quadrant coming over you, let's say it passes like this, and Bermuda would be in that right front quadrant, this is where a lot of the forward momentum and the energy and other things that come into play become a factor. And, you know, people in Bermuda would just assume that not happen. So we'll be watching this very closely. And I think I also detect a little bit of rotation over here still. Surely that can't be the remnants of Julia still hanging around. I noticed that some football games, Friday Night Lights, canceled or postponed. Certainly not canceled for the season, but you know what I mean, canceled for tonight. In parts of the eastern North Carolina area, just unbelievable rainfall. And so now this area is primed. If something, this is a big if, were to come out and make landfall up here or come up or whatever, in the next week to 10 days, it would just be devastating. So no rain of any type, of any organized nature for the eastern Carolinas. Please, we've had enough. So I want to show you Bermuda here, what may be happening over the next day. There's Bermuda right there. This is the 12Z GFS. And as I move through the frames, you see, again, Karl moving just to the west of Bermuda. There's Bermuda there, and Karl is west of there on the GFS track. And it comes up and scoots off just to the south and east of Bermuda in the late overnight hours tonight. We go to the last frame. There's Bermuda there. This is valid at 8 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow, 9 a.m. I guess it is Bermuda time. Or do they share the, I guess it's Atlantic Standard Time. I don't particularly remember exactly how that works. But just after sunrise tomorrow, Karl would be just to the east at a pretty good distance. And if we back this up just a little bit, you see right there, there's Bermuda, there's the center. So luckily the GFS not showing this going to the north and west. That's the point I wanted to make out of this. There is plenty of warm water for this to take advantage of. Bermuda located right up in here. It's hard to see on this particular map, and there is some upper ocean heat content in this area, not as high as down farther to the south, of course, but water temperatures 28, 29 Celsius, undisturbed. So Karl could become a hurricane before passing by, and we'll be hoping for the best for folks there. Sunday looks like it'll be a fantastic day, and even late Saturday afternoon, tomorrow afternoon in Bermuda will be fine. So this could have been worse, as we know, and luckily it's not, at least not yet, and I don't foresee it to be. So here's the other system that we're going to be watching. You notice that it has this loose S shape to it overall. Not a lot of convection with it, but if we look at the vorticity signature, remember I've been showing you this the last few days, And there it is, starting to show up a little bit more in the way of energy and spin in the atmosphere, starting to come together as this system moves generally to the west with time. National Hurricane Center, if we go back to one of the first maps here, indicating 0% chance of development over the next 2 days, and then this moves off generally to the west here towards the eastern Caribbean with only a 20% chance of development in the long term. I think they're being conservative, and rightfully so. We've been burned a few times this year on aggressive modeling with systems, only to see that they struggle, and we don't want to get people all fired up over nothing. That makes sense. I can agree with that. On the other hand, the ensemble prediction system from a lot of these models, where you have the same model run with different variables to give you different outcomes, I mean, this is quite a clustering. You have to admit, this is the overnight GFS Ensemble Member Pressure Center, again from Levi Cowan, tropicaltidbits.com website, and you see a big clustering here in the Caribbean at about 150 hours out, just as an example. You don't have this spread out over a huge area or just a few members. This kind of a density in the modeling showing something developing, you have to take note of. And this coming from the WSI folks, posted on Twitter earlier this morning. Again, pretty dense clustering of the models here showing, at least from the GFS, the possibility of tropical storm conditions here in the Windward Islands. So we got to definitely take note of this system. And in fact, if we look at the GFS, again, my favorite go-to layer when trying to determine the health of a system is the 850 millibar chart. And this is valid Saturday morning. Tomorrow morning, we've already talked about Karl, which would be just to the east of Bermuda over here, and there's Lisa dying out. And this is the very loose energy associated with what would eventually and presumably be 97L. And so here we are Sunday morning, still kind of loosely organized down here in the deep tropics, 72 hours out. This is valid on Monday morning, and here it is moving very quickly. Fairly decent ridging out here over the Atlantic, keeping this system moving west. Another system trailing behind. We'll see if that one tries to develop as well. But this is moving basically due west here, south of about 15 degrees latitude. So between 10 north and 15 north. And at 96 hours next Tuesday morning, this will be the 27th of September, starting to organize a little bit more. And there's Barbados as an example, Trinidad and Tobago. And then finally at day 5, 120 hours out. And this isn't some day 8 or 10 map. This is, this is only 5 days out. And the model developing it probably as a tropical storm at this point. I would assume the way it looks, it's nice and round. You don't have any weird shapes to it. And then this other system behind, we'll see if this does something as well. And maybe more energy behind that. But this is going to be the front runner of our attention. And if I zoom in and show you what this looks like on the Western Atlantic version of this chart, and literally zoom into it down here, there it is, pretty much. There's Barbados there, so coming in maybe south of Barbados. This is, don't worry about the details right now. What we're showing here and seeing is the possible tropical storm threat somewhere in the southern Lesser Antilles, maybe the Windward Islands down here proper. Probably to the north of Trinidad and Tobago, and probably to the south of Guadeloupe, as an example. So, pay attention to this. You should already. You don't need me to tell you that. And, once it gets beyond this point, assuming that it develops, you never know. We come up on the 0Z run tonight and it just doesn't develop it at all. Wouldn't that be something? And it wouldn't surprise me the way this season has gone. But run after run after run, and all the other global models jumping on this suggest that this has a decent chance of developing. So where does it go from here? Well, it all depends on what's happening up in this area. Do we get enough troughing to come in and erode the ridges away to allow this a path to come in towards the Gulf? Big question mark. It's just way too soon to know. Climatology suggests that it would make its way up into the Northwest Caribbean over time, but the way the ridges have built over the east in this sort of endless summer pattern, it wouldn't take much to keep this buried down in the Caribbean as well. But if these ridges are transient, where this comes by and sort of stair steps its way up, yeah, it could be something we have to watch. But, as I say, it's hurricane season, folks, and we're still basically in the peak. And there's that secondary peak that comes along in October around the 10th. I'll show that probably tomorrow just to kind of explain that. We should be paying attention, even if everything up to now has been less than we thought it would be. It only takes that one. I know it's cliche, but when you look at this, especially, the upper ocean heat content in the Caribbean Sea, as this approaches, it'll be tapping into that. And then over here in the Western Caribbean, this is ridiculous at the top of the scale. And what this means in layman's terms is very warm water, very deep in the ocean, so that if something comes in and churns that water up, whips up the waves, it's just churning up warmer and warmer water. Not necessarily warmer, but the amount of energy is almost limitless unless something stalls and sits and spins over it for several days. But when you see these whites showing up and getting into the energy and the physics behind it would bore you to tears. Trust me when I tell you, that is a lot of upper ocean heat content, and so we're going to have to watch this system very closely. And I'll say it one last time, we should be anyway, because it's out there, and we would need to watch it. All right? So that's it for now. I'll be watching what happens with Karl as it passes close to Bermuda. I'm sure social media and the Bermuda Weather Service will keep us informed as to what happens there. And like I said, it should be a nice weekend after Karl passes by. Have a great rest of your Friday. Again, I'm Mark Sept for HurricaneTrack.com. As always, thanks for tuning in, and I'll certainly be with you throughout the weekend with more.